Hi everyone, I'm Shawn, and today I'm just going to talk to you about my experience with the cost of living in China. Um, so I've been living in Nanjing for around a year and a half now, and in that time I've just been working at primary school teaching English and PE. So the main things we're going to cover in today's video is looking at the price of food, price of drinking, transport, entertainment, and accommodation as well. Okay, yeah, so eating in China can be pretty cheap actually. So if you stick to the sort of local family-run restaurants that you find all over probably every city in China, you can pick up meals for like 20, 30 yuan. So you can get things like fried rice, some noodles, some dumplings. It's usually pretty nice and they're super cheap. You can also go have some street food as well. I've tried it before, it's actually really good. I guess you just need to be a bit cautious about where you're getting it from, but I've not really had any problems this far. For kind of mid-range restaurants, so if you fancy something like something Western, something from back home, or maybe some Japanese or Indian or Thai food, um, these restaurants usually cost between 70 yuan, 110, 120, depending on where you're going, and what you're getting as well. Um, and if you want kind of more fancy restaurants, these can be found all over China as well. Um, and depending on where you go again, probably costs like 150, 200, 250. Sort of depends what you're after really. But generally speaking, the cost of food here versus back in the West, like back in the UK, is way cheaper, so much cheaper. And if you enjoy cooking for yourself, um, it's pretty easy to find most ingredients in supermarkets. So like fresh meat, like chicken, beef, fish, these are all quite cheap actually. And vegetables are super cheap here, like way cheaper than back in the UK. And if you're pretty lazy and kind of bored cooking, kind of bored going out for food, you can always deliver to your house. So there's this app called Meituan, which they can deliver straight to your front door, and the delivery fee is really small. Like usually only maximum like 9 yuan, which is about £1. And it's the same thing as Uber Eats or Deliveroo. So you could just go onto the app, look at all the restaurants in your area, and just order whatever you want from there. And you can find most types of restaurants there. So you can find the cheap restaurants, the big fancy restaurants, whatever kind of fancies your pick. So drinking in China can be cheap. If you buy stuff from the supermarket, um, I say it's usually cheaper than back home. And most supermarkets have a lot of the same things you buy back home. So lots of them have like Captain Morgan's or Smirnoff or different kinds of gins, whatever. And you can pretty much find all of the beers here as well that you see back home. I'd say on average, yeah, these tend to be a lot cheaper than they are in the UK. The only thing it probably is maybe more expensive, I'd say, is cider. It doesn't seem to be that popular here. Um, it's a little more expensive. Um, but they also have this Chinese spirit called baijiu, which is essentially just a white spirit. It can be pretty strong as well. You can get bottles of that for like it's sometimes as cheap as 10 yuan, which is like a pound. Um, but on the flip side, you can also get really expensive bottles for a couple hundred yuan or a few thousand yuan. Depends on how much you want to spend, and also the quality depends a little bit on how much the bottle costs. Um, but yeah, if you want to get drunk for cheap, then yeah, it can be pretty easy to do that here. Drinking in bars and nightclubs a little bit more different. So some bars can be pretty cheap. Some of them maybe buy beer for about 30 yuan, which is around £3. Um, and some places you can get some cocktails for like 50 yuan, 60 yuan, which are usually pretty good. We can also get some expensive bars as well. And for nightclubs, I found so far nightclubs tend to be a little bit more expensive for alcohol. They usually cost probably pretty similar to what you pay in like London or Edinburgh. So maybe about 60, 70 yuan for a beer, 50 yuan, 60 for a shot. Um, and for bottles, if you like buying bottles when you're out, these can be usually about 200 yuan, 300 yuan. It's probably pretty similar to what you pay back in the UK. So traveling around in China is usually pretty convenient and way cheaper than back in the West as well. So for Nanjing, the probably two most common ways of getting around the city would be by Didi or by metro. So Didi is essentially just like Uber, and it's a lot cheaper than Uber and get a taxi as well. So for me, a Didi into downtown takes around 30 minutes and only costs about 30, 35 yuan, which is just a little over £3. And the taxis here are usually pretty cheap as well. Usually only cost about 2 yuan every kilometre or something like that. So it's really convenient. You just get the Didi app, type in where you want to go, and wait for your car to pick you up. And for the metro, most developed cities have a really convenient metro system. You can usually get to anywhere you want to go. And the maximum fare for one journey is usually around 9 yuan, so just about a little over £1. And that could be a very long journey. So in Nanjing, if you want to go from one side to the other, it could probably take about 2 hours in the metro. But again, still with only maximum 9 yuan. And there's another way for getting around is this rental bike service. So this is basically, you just scan the QR code of a bike that you find anywhere in the city, and you can cycle it around as long as you don't leave the city. You can cycle anywhere you want. And this costs about 1 yuan every 30 minutes. And the best part about this is, when you want to stop and leave the bike, you can just get off and lock the bike wherever you want. And we don't have to hook up to a station or anything like that. It's just kind of pick it up and go and leave it where you want. And if you have a little bit of money, maybe you could look into buying your own e-bike. So an e-bike is just like an electric scooter, and it's a pretty popular way for Chinese people to get around the city as well. So these probably cost usually minimum 1,000 yuan, can cost up to like 2,000 yuan, depending on the type that you get. And for traveling around China, I say the probably most convenient way is to use the high-speed rail. So you can get to pretty much every major city using the high-speed rail, and we're pretty comfortable as well, and definitely very, very reasonably priced. So for me to go from Nanjing to Shanghai, it's maybe around a few hundred kilometers distance. Takes a couple of hours by train, but only costs about 200 yuan, so just over £20. And you can get the high-speed rail to pretty much every city in China for pretty cheap. And for flying, I haven't flown much within China, but I have heard the prices aren't really too expensive either. Yeah, so travel in China can be pretty cheap. Definitely doable if you're on a budget as well. And getting around the city is pretty easy on the pocket. So accommodation in China, the cost can vary quite a lot, depending on a few factors. So depending on which city you live in, so cities like Shanghai and Beijing, rent can be very expensive there, especially if you live in the city centre. Maybe looking at 6 or 7,000 yuan a month. So usually in these big cities, a lot of people usually kind of live a bit further out from the city centre. So it's okay if you don't mind commuting, but if you've maybe got like an hour commute to work every day, maybe a bit of a hassle. But in the slightly smaller cities like Nanjing and Suzhou, rent prices are a bit more reasonable. So for Nanjing, if you want to live downtown, it's maybe about 4,000 yuan a month if you want a flat to yourself. But there are ways to bring the cost down. For example, if you want to flat share with someone, I think it's pretty easy to find people to live with. There's usually some WeChat groups with foreigners, or you can go on Facebook and find people to live with if you want. And every school that you get a job with will either give you a housing allowance to find your own flat, or they'll give you on-campus accommodation for free, or sometimes they offer you the choice. So my last school, I had on-campus accommodation, which is nice and convenient for getting to work. In this current school, I get housing allowance, so I could choose my own flat. So my flat costs around 2,600 yuan a month, plus bills, takes up to just below 3,000 yuan. So it's about just over £300. And I have it's a 3-bedroom flat, but one of the bedrooms was converted into an office. Also has quite a nice bathroom. It's got a kitchen, a big living room. So I think I got pretty lucky with my one actually. It's nice and new. It's very big. But the reason mine isn't too expensive is because I don't live close to downtown anymore. So I live maybe half an hour away by taxi. So for me, yeah, I think that was quite a big factor in getting such a nice apartment for so cheap. But it's close to my school though, so it's not such a big deal for me. So yeah, and also another thing to be aware of, if you do choose to rent by yourself in China, usually rent isn't paid monthly like it is back home, and landlords usually want to rent either in chunks of 3 months, 6 months, or sometimes a year. So that's something to be aware of if you plan on coming here. Maybe you want to have a bit of money saved up, just so you can pay, just so you've got enough to cover a few months' rent if your landlord wants it up front. But some landlords, so like mine's, are usually willing to compromise. So for the first couple of months, I was able to pay monthly until I got paid from my school, and now I just pay every 3 months. So it's about 7,200 yuan every 3 months or something like that. But yeah, overall, renting in China can be cheap depending on where you want to live. So if you live further out from the city centre, it can be pretty cheap and pretty nice. But if you live kind of more downtown, it can be a little bit more pricey if you want a nice apartment and you want to live by yourself as well. And here's just a little tour. Yeah, so thank you for watching my video. I hope it was at least a little bit helpful. If you want some more information, then be sure to check out the website. So there's some blog posts on there with a bit more information about other aspects of living in China. And there's also one it goes into a bit more detail about the cost of living. And also be sure to check out the other videos on the channel as well, because there's lots of very useful tips about moving here. But yeah, if you have any questions, just be sure to leave a comment on the video or just send an email. But yeah, thank you for watching.